Madam Speaker, this bill presents a very simple proposition. Should someone who is a guest in this country, who endangers Americans while driving drunk, be allowed to stay in this country? Republicans say, of course not. And the Democrats say, sure, why not? This ought to be a no-brainer, especially after so many incidents of preventable DUI traffic deaths involving foreign nationals. Mr. Moore and Mr. Carter mentioned a few of the cases of aliens with multiple drunk driving offenses released time and time again and not deported, while the butcher's bill steadily grows. Why are such people allowed to remain in our country? Because the Democrats want it that way.
One can only regard with amazement the high indignation which the previous gentleman speaker just mobilized against the Democrats in Congress. He accuses us of not taking DUI seriously, and nothing he said could provide a more striking contrast between the parties. Well, I'm afraid I have to go there. I was hoping not to have to go there. But I seem to remember when we were met in joint session at what would have been a State of the Union address in this year of 2025. And we left the chamber after several hours of President Trump's speech. And we got outside, and then a car plowed into the back of a parked police cruiser. And the police descend on the situation. The door opens up. The driver staggers out. It turns out it's the chief of staff to Speaker Mike Johnson, who then is administered the breathalyzer test, and he's got DWI. He's driving while drunk, or maybe it's DUI, driving under the influence in the District of Columbia. And Speaker Johnson immediately says everybody deserves a second chance and we should forgive him. So we didn't make a big deal out of that. We've got a law right now which allows for the deportation and the inadmissibility of anybody who goes out and drives drunk and injures somebody. And if you're here unlawfully, you're kicked out anyway. So we're talking about permanent residence to the country. If you go out and you get in a DUI, you injure somebody, you're deported immediately from the country. So now they talk about all those cases. Those cases are already covered. What we're talking about is cases where, say, somebody's not injured at all. There's no property damage at all, and they want to deport those people even if they've got family, they've been in the country for 15 or 20 years. They don't even want to give any discretion to the judge to decide. So that's what the disagreement is about, this very small matter in a small number of cases where nobody is injured. But if the distinguished gentleman and his colleagues are really interested in doing something about drunk driving in America, let's use this as the occasion to do it.
Today we consider a simple common sense bill that says if you're a guest in our country and you drive drunk, you should in fact be deported. Now to the average American, passing this bill is a no-brainer. Even in a polarized time, Democrats should be able to join Republicans and unanimously support such reasonable legislation. After all, deporting dangerous criminals is a rational, normal, and coherent step that this House should take. Unfortunately, I am skeptical that we will see much agreement from my Democrat colleagues on this bill.
With this strained legislation, we are bumping into two major social problems: deadly drunk driving on our roads and a broken immigration system. But alas, we're not doing anything to solve either problem. The bill pretends to do something about both of them, but it really does little or nothing about either of them. We lose 11,000 people a year to drunk driving crashes. More than 1 million people are arrested on DUI charges every year, Mr. Speaker. I lost a beloved cousin of mine in Florida who was in the prime of her life just after graduating from college when she was killed by a drunk driver while she was riding a bicycle on the roads of Florida. So I take this issue very seriously of drunk driving, and I've worked on it fastidiously for a long time in my career. There's a lot we could do in Congress to improve safety on the streets, including imposing a nationwide mandatory ignition interlock device on the cars of all convicted drunk drivers. We did that in my state of Maryland after fighting the liquor lobby for a long time, but we finally got that done. We could also pass my bill, the Sarah Debink Langenkamp Active Transportation Safety Act, which would support state and local government efforts to build safer transportation networks for bicyclists and for pedestrians. Unfortunately, this bill doesn't do anything like that. Indeed, it's hard to see how it will reduce drunk driving at all. It's obviously not a serious attempt to address the social problem of drunk driving. It does not increase criminal penalties for DUI anywhere in the country, and it does nothing to promote public education about the dangers of drunk driving. It will sadly improve nothing on the roads. As an immigration law, it does nothing to make it more difficult for undocumented people to enter our country unlawfully, nor does it make it easier for people to acquire the documents to enter the country legally. It is a purely punitive measure, and it's both radically under-inclusive and radically overbroad. It only targets the very tiny fraction of all DUI violations in the country committed by non-citizens and does nothing to crack down on drunk driving by citizens who are responsible for the vast majority of it. Immigrants who drive drunk are already covered by the criminal law, and the undocumented ones are already categorically deportable. They don't need to drive drunk to be deported. They are deportable now because they are not in the country lawfully. Additionally, because of the breadth of DUI statutes around the country, this legislation will render deportable people who never drove drunk at all without any opportunity for judicial discretion or waiver. Under current immigration law, undocumented people are already both inadmissible and deportable. Furthermore, conviction for serious DUIs already render even lawful permanent residents who've been in the country for decades potentially deportable and inadmissible in the first instance. Under the Immigration and Nationality Act, any non-citizen who is convicted of or who admits to a crime involving moral turpitude, a so-called CIMT, is generally inadmissible to the country. Likewise, any non-citizen who's convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude, where a sentence of 1 year or longer may be imposed, is deportable from the country. So serious DUI offenses are already deportable crimes under current law. The following DUI offenses are all considered crimes involving moral turpitude. Any DUI where the maximum possible penalty is 1 year or more and where there is serious bodily harm, hit and runs, any aggravated DUI, and any DUI involving driving with knowledge of having an invalid, suspended, or revoked license. But this bill goes far beyond even this very stringent current law by making permanent resident green card holders deportable for a single infraction, even where no one is hurt and no property is damaged. This will lead to some very harsh results. In Arizona, sleeping in your car while drunk without even starting the car can get you convicted of a misdemeanor DUI. And under this bill, a single conviction for even that offense would make a 20-year permanent resident of America, a green card holder, deportable from the country. That person is rightfully deportable if they engage in an act of drunk driving that hurts someone or kills someone, but that's the law today. Or if they drive drunk without a license, but that's the law today. And an undocumented alien is, of course, deportable in all cases. So you don't need a statute to deport them for falling asleep drunk in their car. Today, there are nearly 13 million green card holders, permanent residents in the United States. These are people who have followed all the rules. We're not talking about the undocumented people who are here unlawfully. They're already taken care of. But there are 13 million green card holders in the United States, with 9 million eligible to become citizens now. Categorically deporting individuals who are convicted for any DUI offense without any regard for the severity or consequence simply defies common sense. This legislation on a tiny subset of criminal events distracts from the real problem. My distinguished colleague has invoked several terrible drunk driving incidents by repeat offenders who are undocumented. They should have been deported from the country long ago. My colleague is talking about people who drunk drive and kill people. That's already a deportable and inadmissible offense. So that's not what the meaning of this legislation is. let's look at what a tiny slice of criminal events we're talking about and ask whether, in fact, that's something that advances public policy. I don't think it does. Let's work together to impose compulsory ignition interlock devices on the cars of all convicted drunk drivers, including the overwhelming majority who are U.S. citizens, and let's really make the roads safer and stop the repetitive scapegoating of immigrants. We can address DUIs in a serious way here in Congress if we're serious about the issue. That's what I did as a state senator in Maryland. We could do that across the country, Madam Speaker, and I will reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to yield 3 minutes to my good friend from Georgia, Mr. Carter.
Gentleman is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Madam Speaker, I rise today in strong support of H.R. 875, the Jeremy and Angel C. and Sergeant Brandon Mendoza Protect Our Communities from DUIs Act of 2025. This piece of legislation is crucial to restoring common sense to our nation's judicial system. Over the past 4 years, the Biden administration has allowed millions of undocumented immigrants to pour into our country. Along with zero oversight and accountability for the crisis, the Biden administration allowed illegal immigrants to stay in the country, even after committing horrible crimes. This piece of legislation would give the courts the ability to deport illegal aliens from America and bar them from reentry if they are convicted of a DUI or a DUI-related charge. This issue hits home for me. In my district, a 15-year-old girl and her grandmother were killed by an illegal alien who was driving drunk. This was a terrible, avoidable tragedy, and sadly, true justice was not served. The assailant only received 15 years per death and will be out to roam free in America by the time he is 67 years old. Madam Speaker, this was in Nahunta, Georgia, in Brantley County, in my district. I met with the grandmother, the other grandmother of this child, who shared with me the grief that this family has gone through since that time. There's no reason at all that this should have happened. There's no reason for the American taxpayer to have to fund the incarceration of this person or any other programs to help him get back on the streets of Georgia. Though my example is the worst outcome possible, illegal aliens should not be able to stay in America with a minor penalty for driving under the influence in the first place. This legislation would close this loophole, and I thank the gentleman for Alabama for doing this, for bringing this forward. It would close that loophole that allows illegal aliens to get off lightly when committing fatal acts such as vehicular manslaughter under the influence. I urge my colleagues to vote in support of this legislation to help bring back common sense to our immigration and legal systems after these 4 years of pure chaos. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
Madam Speaker, I reserve.
The gentleman from Alabama reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The distinguished gentleman from Georgia has just offered us a vivid demonstration of what's wrong with this bill and how the rhetoric supporting it doesn't support the bill. He describes an indescribably tragic, terrible case where an undocumented alien is driving a car and kills people in the gentleman's district. First of all, that person already could be deported just by virtue of being undocumented. Secondly, under current law, having killed someone, he would be immediately deportable. So he was convicted of his offense, sentenced to jail, and he would be deported immediately upon leaving. And in fact, the president could commute his sentence, which is what he's been doing, and have him deported right now. You don't need this bill in order to make that happen. And so that is a demonstration of why this is superfluous legislation. All it does is to say, in a case where, say, nobody is hurt at all, the case of somebody who's asleep in their car in Arizona, for example, there are statutes like that where you don't even have to be in a moving vehicle if you're drunk inside the vehicle. That person, nobody's hurt, there's no property damage, that person could be deported as a permanent resident, even if they've been here for 20 years and their kids are in school, they have nothing else on their record. So that's all this bill is doing, is an opportunity to get up and make speeches about how we're going to get rid of people who kill people in their cars as drunk drivers. That's already the law. And so what I'm saying is, if we're going to take the time on the floor to deal with the problem of drunk driving, and again, I take this very seriously because I lost a cousin to drunk driver who's a U.S. citizen, not a non-citizen, and the vast majority of drunk driving incidents occur because of citizens, not because of non-citizens, because the vast majority of the people in the country are here legally as citizens. Well, then let's do a serious thing. Let's say anybody convicted in the country, a U.S. citizen, a permanent resident, or an unlawful person who is somehow still in the country, must have a permanent ignition interlock device put on their car. Now, obviously, the undocumented person's just going to be deported. Fine. Now, what about everybody else? Should convicted drunk drivers be able to just go back out on the road? And this is the fight I had with Republicans in Annapolis when I was a state senator. They were the ones saying, well, that's too harsh a punishment. And I'm saying to them, no, maybe it's painful that you got to go through the ignition interlock device, which says you do the breathalyzer in your car before you can drive again. They say that's painful to have to do that every morning and going back from work. That doesn't compare to the pain of someone who loses a mother, a father, a son, a daughter, a cousin, an uncle, an aunt, or what have you. But if we want to deal with drunk driving, let's seriously deal with drunk driving. And this legislation is not the way to do it. I'm going to yield 5 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from the state of Washington.
The lady is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in strong opposition to H.R. 875. I, too, take DUIs extremely seriously. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, approximately 37 people die in drunk driving incidents every day in the United States. And as the ranking member has just been noting, there are many things that we can and should do to prevent driving under the influence. But also, as the ranking member has pointed out, all of these truly horrifying and tragic stories that we're hearing about from the other side are stories that already render an immigrant deportable right now. If you kill somebody right now, you serve your time and then you are deported. We just had a hearing this morning on how the Trump administration is literally dismissing cases for people who are in a legal process for immigration just so they can deport them. So they can certainly do that for somebody who has been convicted of drunk driving and is serving out their sentence. They could commute that they could take that case and deport that person immediately if they wanted to. Scapegoating immigrants is what this bill does. It scapegoats immigrants by making a single misdemeanor DUI subject to the extremely serious punishment of deportation. Is simply not an appropriate response. The bill also applies to all immigrants, including lawful permanent residents, people who Republican colleagues across the aisle have claimed to like, the ones that they said came here the right way. And it gives no recognition whatsoever to the patchwork of differences and overbroad statutes of what actually constitutes a DUI across the country in different states. It's important to recognize first that serious public safety threats are already deportable offenses. We've been talking about this, but it's important to say it again because, again, the cases that are being brought up are cases where those people are already deportable. Under current immigration law, many serious DUI crimes are considered what is called a crime involving moral turpitude, and therefore already makes someone removable or inadmissible. But this bill does not recognize how widely DUI laws differ across the country and the extremely low bar that is set to receive a DUI conviction in some states. For example, in Arizona, the DUI statute allows people to be charged with a DUI if they're intoxicated and have, quote, physical control of their vehicle. And this issue came to a head in the Ninth Circuit, which, in reviewing an appeal of a removal case for a non-citizen who was charged under this law, found that the physical control language meant that under this statute, and I quote now, one may be convicted under it for sitting in one's own car, in one's own driveway, with the key in the ignition and a bottle of beer in one's hand. While this person in this case had been ordered deported because his conviction under Arizona's law constituted a crime involving moral turpitude, the Ninth Circuit overturned that ruling because the actions covered by the law could not all reasonably be seen as crimes involving moral turpitude. As the court put it, and this is a quote, "Drunken driving is despicable. Having physical control of a car while drinking is not." If this bill had been law at the time, the case would have never reached the Ninth Circuit because no judge would have had the discretion to rule whether this so-called crime merited deportation. This bill would prevent judges from being able to decide if the punishment fits the crime. In my home state of Washington, we have a similar law where someone can be convicted of a misdemeanor DUI without actually driving a vehicle. And while Republicans might wave away our concerns by saying that prosecutors have the discretion to not bring charges under these circumstances, we know about this case precisely because prosecutors chose to file charges and it went to court. This bill does not recognize that under these overbroad DUI statutes, individuals who have made a conscious choice not to drive, they've gone to a party, they've had a couple of beers, they realize they should not be driving, so they go and they sit in their car to sleep it off. Under this bill, those people who have made that conscious choice not to drive impaired may be charged with DUIs simply for sleeping in their car. And so to my Republican colleagues, how many of you have constituents or friends or neighbors who have sat in their cars after leaving the bar to stay warm? We know how cold Midwest winters get. Should we really be criminalizing people for staying warm in their cars and sleeping off a hangover? Under this bill, people would now be subjected to deportation. Now, during markup and at rules, I submitted an amendment.
The gentlelady's time has expired.
I'll yield the gentlelady an additional minute.
Gentlewoman's recognized.
Thank you. Under this bill, during markup and at rules, I submitted an amendment to ensure that immigration judges have the discretion to decide if a DUI conviction actually merits deportation for green card holders and others here lawfully. It would have allowed judges to merely consider mitigating factors, such as if anyone was harmed or the length of time since they were convicted of a DUI. This is a common sense amendment that would have made the bill substantially fairer, but unfortunately, the amendment was rejected. There are members and former members of this body, right here in Congress, who have been arrested and convicted of a DUI, and I would just ask that the charity and the grace that we extend for second chances to people would extend also to those green card holders, including those who have been here for decades. Let's just give a chance for a judge to determine whether their conviction merited deportation, let alone that second chance. This bill does nothing but scapegoat immigrants for so-called DUIs.
Time has expired.
I urge my colleagues to reject the bill.
And I reserve.